When a flight attendant's political rage leads her to assault a passenger wearing a MAGA hat, she learns a costly lesson about tolerance and professionalism. Her impulsive act of ideological hatred sparks a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. A red MAGA hat would transform a routine cross-country flight into a viral confrontation that exposed the dangerous side of political hatred. James Henderson settled into his first-class window seat, placing his worn leather briefcase beneath the seat in front of him. At 52, he'd made this Atlanta to Los Angeles route dozens of times for his construction supply business, but today felt different. Several passengers had already given his MAGA hat disapproving glances during boarding, though James paid them little mind. He'd earned his success through hard work and stood firmly behind his conservative values, even if they weren't popular in certain circles. As the cabin filled, James pulled out his tablet and opened the Daily Wire, scanning headlines while other passengers filed past. A few business types nodded politely. They'd seen plenty of MAGA hats before. But when lead flight attendant Sarah Martinez stepped into first class to begin her pre-flight checks, her whole body tensed at the sight of his red cap. "Watch this one," Sarah muttered to her colleague Jenny, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Another entitled Trump supporter who probably thinks he owns the plane." James pretended not to hear, keeping his eyes on his tablet. At 26, Sarah had strong opinions about politics, as her social media followers knew well. Her Instagram feed was filled with posts mocking Republicans and calling Trump supporters fascists. But today, she wasn't hiding behind a screen. She had a real conservative sitting in 3A. During takeoff procedures, Sarah made a point of checking James's seatbelt with unnecessary roughness. When beverage service began 30 minutes later, she worked her way through first class with forced smiles for everyone except James. "Coffee, please," James said pleasantly when she finally reached his row, lowering his tablet. Sarah's lip curled as she stared at his hat. "We seem to be out of coffee in first class. Maybe try Coach?" Several passengers looked up, sensing the hostility in her voice. A man across the aisle quietly raised his phone and began recording. "I can see the coffee pot right there," James said calmly, pointing to the full carafe on her cart. "Is there some problem?" "Yeah, there's a problem," Sarah snapped, her professional demeanor cracking. "Your hat is a symbol of hate, and I'm sick of serving people who support fascism." The cabin grew quiet as passengers turned to watch the confrontation unfold. James remained still, hands folded in his lap, as Sarah's face flushed with anger. James maintained steady eye contact with Sarah, his composed demeanor a stark contrast to her visible anger. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the tension mounted. Across the aisle, Kevin Williams, a business executive in 3B, continued recording discreetly while pretending to check his email. "Miss Martinez," James said calmly, noting her name tag, "I understand we may have different political views, but I'm simply requesting the same service as other passengers." Sarah's knuckles whitened as she gripped the beverage cart. "You conservatives always play the victim card. Maybe, if you weren't supporting policies that hurt people, you deserve better service." James pulled out his phone and began taking notes, speaking each word as he typed. Flight attendant Sarah Martinez. Refusing service. Citing political beliefs. His deliberate documentation seemed to further agitate Sarah. "Are you threatening me?" she demanded, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. This is exactly what I'd expect from a MAGA supporter, trying to get someone fired just because they stand up to your privilege. A middle-aged woman 2 rows ahead turned around, openly filming now. Sarah shot her a venomous look before stomping off toward the galley, whispering intensely to her colleague Jenny. Jenny's uncomfortable expression suggested she wanted no part in the confrontation. Over the next 15 minutes, Sarah made repeated passes by James's seat, each time making audible comments clearly meant for him to hear. "Can't believe they let fascists fly first class," she muttered during one pass. "Probably bought his ticket with money from exploiting workers," she said during another. James continued reading his tablet, occasionally making notes on his phone. His calm persistence seemed to irritate Sarah even more than his hat. During her next pass through the cabin, she deliberately bumped his elbow, causing his tablet to clatter onto his tray table. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said with exaggerated insincerity. "I guess I'm just one of those clumsy minorities you people want to keep down." "I'd like your employee number, please," James stated firmly, looking directly at her name tag. "And the names of your supervising flight attendants." "Of course you would," Sarah sneered. "Going to call Fox News about the mean flight attendant who wouldn't bow down to your MAGA superiority?" Kevin Williams cleared his throat. "I've been recording this entire interaction," he said quietly. "And I've already emailed several clips to Airline customer service." Sarah's face flushed deeper red as she realized how many passengers were now watching and recording. She retreated to the galley, but her angry muttering carried clearly through the cabin. The other flight attendants kept their distance, appearing increasingly uncomfortable with their colleagues' behavior as the situation continued to escalate. Sarah emerged from the galley clutching a fresh pot of coffee, her movements sharp and aggressive as she began serving passengers. She pointedly ignored James, instead offering coffee to everyone else in first class with exaggerated cheerfulness. "Coffee, sir? Coffee, ma'am? Careful. It's nice and hot," she announced loudly, making eye contact with each passenger except James. When she finally reached his row, she stood there silently, coffee pot hovering. James looked up from his tablet. "Coffee, please," he requested politely. Sarah's hands trembled as she poured, causing several drops to splash onto the tray table. "Oops," she said with a smirk. "Guess my hands shake when I'm around fascists." "I'd like to speak to your lead flight attendant," James stated calmly, dabbing at the coffee drops with a napkin. "Oh, of course you would," Sarah raised her voice, clearly performing for the cabin now. "Because that's what privileged conservatives do, right? Try to get working-class people fired just for standing up to their oppressive beliefs?" The business executive Kevin had his phone out again, openly recording now. Several other passengers were doing the same, their devices partially hidden behind magazines or tablets. A young mother in 2A shielded her sleeping child's ears from Sarah's increasing volume. Jenny, the other flight attendant, approached cautiously. "Sarah, maybe I should take over this section." "No!" Sarah snapped, her coffee pot shaking more violently. "I'm not letting him win. These MAGA people think they can just walk all over everyone with their hate speech." She gestured at James's hat with the coffee pot, causing more drops to splash across his tray table. James remained perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap. "Miss Martinez, I understand you're upset, but this is a professional environment. Your personal political views shouldn't affect your service." "Professional environment?" Sarah's voice rose higher. "You want to talk about professional while wearing that symbol of hate? That hat represents everything wrong with this country." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other passengers squirmed uncomfortably in their seats, many now openly recording the confrontation. Jenny hovered nearby, clearly torn between intervening and avoiding Sarah's wrath. Through it all, James maintained his composed demeanor, occasionally making notes on his phone as Sarah continued her tirade. "You think you're so smart, documenting everything," Sarah sneered, leaning closer. "But we all see through you people. Acting all calm and reasonable while you support policies that hurt real Americans. You make me sick." The coffee pot in her hands shook more violently with each word, hot liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Several passengers gasped as Sarah took another aggressive step toward James's seat, her uniform sleeve barely missing the hot coffee. "Miss Martinez," James said quietly, his calm voice a stark contrast to her fury, I'd strongly advise you to step back and consider your next actions carefully. Sarah's knuckles whitened around the coffee pot handle as she glared down at James. You know what? I don't have to take this anymore. She slammed the coffee pot onto his tray table, causing hot liquid to slosh over the sides. You people think you can just sit there all smug and superior while wearing your hate symbols. James calmly picked up his tablet before the spreading coffee could reach it. Miss Martinez, that's airline property you're mishandling, and you're creating a safety hazard with hot liquids. His measured tone seemed to further infuriate Sarah. Safety hazard. You want to talk about safety? Sarah's voice reached a shrill pitch that made several nearby passengers wince. What about the safety of marginalized communities? What about their rights? Kevin, the business executive, stood up from his seat. Ma'am, I think you need to step back and compose yourself. This is completely unprofessional. Stay out of this, Sarah snapped, spinning to face him. Another privileged white male defending his own kind. Her sudden movement knocked the coffee pot completely over, sending the remaining hot liquid cascading across James's lap. James jumped up instinctively, coffee dripping from his khakis. Still, his voice remained steady. Jenny, he called to the other flight attendant, I need paper towels, and I'm officially requesting the lead flight attendant's presence immediately. Jenny hurried forward with napkins, but Sarah blocked her path. Don't help him. Can't you see what that hat represents? He deserves worse than a little spilled coffee. The young mother from 2A spoke up, her sleeping child now awake and whimpering. This is ridiculous. He hasn't done anything wrong. You're the one creating a scene. Of course you'd defend him, Sarah snarled, pacing the narrow aisle like a caged animal. You're probably all Trump supporters. This whole plane is probably full of fascists. More phones emerged from seats throughout first class, their camera lenses tracking Sarah's erratic movements. James stood quietly dabbing at his coffee-stained pants, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Sarah's increasing hysteria. I've got it all on video, Kevin announced loudly, holding up his phone, including the deliberate coffee spill. That's assault, by the way. Sarah's face contorted with rage. You're recording me? That's harassment. Delete that right now. She lunged toward Kevin, reaching for his phone. Several passengers gasped as she stumbled, catching herself on the back of a seat. Jenny finally managed to reach the cabin phone. Captain, we need assistance in first class immediately. She spoke urgently into the receiver. This is becoming a serious situation. James remained standing, his phone steady in his hand as he continued documenting everything. Miss Martinez, he said quietly, I strongly suggest you return to the galley and wait for your supervisor. You're only making this worse for yourself. Worse for myself? Sarah's eyes flashed dangerously as she turned back toward James. I'll show you worse. Her hands balled into fists at her sides as she took another threatening step toward him. Sarah's rage reached its boiling point. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a fresh pot of scalding coffee from the nearby service cart. You want documentation? She sneered, her voice trembling with hatred. Let me give you something to document. The coffee pot wavered dangerously in her shaking hands as she stepped closer to James. Several passengers called out in alarm, but before anyone could intervene, Sarah stumbled forward. Whether intentional or not, the motion sent a cascade of steaming coffee directly onto James's chest and lap. James let out an involuntary gasp as the scalding liquid soaked through his shirt. Angry red patches immediately began forming on his exposed skin, but he maintained his composure, continuing to record with one hand while using the other to hold his now dripping shirt away from his burns. Oh my God, she did that on purpose, the young mother exclaimed, her phone steadily recording. Her child began crying at the commotion, adding to the chaos in the cabin. Kevin jumped to his feet, his own coffee forgotten. That's assault! She just assaulted a passenger! He pulled out his business card and handed it to James. "I'm a witness, and I've got it all on video." Jenny rushed forward with the first aid kit, her face pale. "Sir, let me help you with those burns." She shot a horrified look at her fellow flight attendant. "Sarah, what have you done?" Sarah's momentary satisfaction turned to visible panic as she registered the severity of her actions. He deserved it. You all saw how he was provoking me with that hat." She backed away from the growing crowd of concerned passengers bumping into the service cart. "The only person doing any provoking here is you," a businessman in 3C called out, holding up his phone, "and we've got multiple videos to prove it." James carefully documented his injuries, photographing the rapidly developing burns on his chest and arms. The coffee had soaked through his light blue shirt, leaving angry red skin visible beneath the wet fabric. Despite the obvious pain, his voice remained steady as he addressed Jenny. "I'll need an incident report filed, and I'd like the names of everyone who witnessed this." "Already getting their information," Kevin assured him, passing around his business notebook for witnesses to add their contact details. "Corporate lawyer," he added with a meaningful look at Sarah. "This isn't going away with a simple apology." Sarah's face drained of color as she watched passengers documenting her actions from every angle. Her earlier righteous anger deflated, replaced by the dawning realization of what she'd done. I was just what?" Jenny interrupted, applying burn ointment to James's injuries. "Assaulting a passenger because you didn't like his political views? That's not what we're trained for, Sarah. This isn't what we stand for." The lead flight attendant finally pushed through the growing crowd, taking in the scene with professional concern. "What happened here?" she demanded, her experienced gaze noting James's injuries, the spilled coffee, and the phones recording everything. Several passengers spoke at once, but James's calm voice cut through the chaos. "I'd like to file a formal complaint," he stated, wincing slightly as Jenny treated another burn. "And I'll need the airline's incident procedures followed to the letter." The aircraft touched down at LAX amid a flurry of activity. Through the windows, James could see the flashing lights of police vehicles and an ambulance waiting on the tarmac. The lead flight attendant had radioed ahead, following standard protocol for passenger assault incidents. As paramedics boarded the plane, Kevin organized the other witnesses. "I've got clear footage from the moment she started harassing him about the hat," he explained to one of the responding officers. "You can see her escalating the situation despite Mr. Henderson remaining calm throughout." The paramedics carefully documented James's injuries, photographing the angry red burns across his chest and neck. "These are first-degree burns, sir," the lead paramedic noted, carefully applying more burn cream. "We'll need to document the progression of these injuries over the next 24 to 48 hours. Sarah stood near the galley, her earlier bravado completely deflated as she watched police officers collecting statements from passengers. Jenny handed over her incident report, which detailed Sarah's increasingly hostile behavior throughout the flight. She'd been making comments about conservative passengers for months, Jenny admitted to the investigating officer. "But none of us thought she'd actually assault someone." The young mother from 4B approached the officers, her sleeping child now cradled in one arm. "I have video from a different angle," she offered, pulling up the footage on her phone. "You can clearly hear her mocking his hat before the assault, and her exact words when she poured the coffee." Airline security arrived to collect Sarah's written statement, which quickly raised eyebrows among the investigating officers. "Ms. Martinez claims Mr. Henderson provoked the incident," one officer noted, comparing her report to the growing stack of witness statements. "But that's not what any of these videos show." Kevin, who had been making calls since landing, approached James with purpose. "Mr. Henderson, I've contacted our firm's Civil Rights Division. They're very interested in taking your case. This isn't just assault, it's politically motivated discrimination. The airline's HR representative arrived, looking grave as she reviewed the preliminary evidence. "Ms. Martinez, you're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation," she announced. Sarah's union representative, who had rushed to the scene, could only shake his head as he watched the videos on various passengers' phones. James sat patiently as police photographers documented his injuries and collected his coffee-stained MAGA hat as evidence. "We'll need to review Ms. Martinez's service history," the HR representative explained. "Several passengers have mentioned previous incidents with conservative passengers." A quick search of Sarah's public social media accounts revealed a disturbing pattern. Screenshots of her recent posts showed a clear bias against Republican voters, with several inflammatory statements about MAGA hat wearers in particular. These posts were quickly downloaded and added to the growing evidence file. "Sir," one of the officers addressed James, "we have enough here for criminal charges if you wish to pursue them." This is clearly documented assault with political motivation as an aggravating factor. As the investigation deepened, airline officials combed through Sarah Martinez's employment records with growing concern. Her personnel file revealed 2 previous written warnings about bringing political discussions into the workplace, including one incident where she had refused service to a passenger wearing a conservative-themed T-shirt. "We've uncovered several complaints from the past 6 months," the HR director explained to the airline's legal team. Multiple passengers reported feeling uncomfortable with Ms. Jihu Tamiti Martinez's political commentary during flights. She spread the documentation across the conference table, including printed screenshots of Martinez's social media activity. The social media posts painted a disturbing picture. Just 3 days before the incident, Martinez had tweeted, "Next MAGA hat wearer on my flight, better watch their back. Our resistance." Her Instagram feed contained multiple stories of her bragging about making conservatives cry during flights, complete with photos of passengers she had targeted. Kevin Williams, now acting as James Henderson's legal representative, methodically built a comprehensive case file. "The pattern is clear," he explained while reviewing security footage with airline investigators. "The coffee cart camera shows her deliberately tilting the cup at a steep angle. That's not how any trained flight attendant serves hot beverages." The airline's safety compliance team confirmed Kevin's observation. "Standard serving temperature for coffee is 140 degrees Fahrenheit, the lead investigator noted. "Our logs show this cart's coffee was maintained at 165 degrees, well above regulations. Mrs. Sizmitsi Martinez would have known this." 3 regular business travelers on the route came forward with written statements. "She's made snide comments about my Republican campaign button before," one executive reported. "I switched to morning flights to avoid her service." The lead flight attendant, Jenny, provided additional context during her formal interview. Sarah would scan passengers during boarding, looking for political indicators like buttons or hats. She'd then make comments to other crew members about educating the conservatives on her flights. Ground crew members also submitted statements about Martinez's behavior before the flight. She saw Mr. Henderson's hat during pre-boarding and said something like, "Watch this one get what's coming to him," a gate agent recalled. "I thought she was just venting, not actually planning something." As evidence mounted, media outlets began picking up the story. Conservative news channels ran segments about political discrimination in the service industry, while liberal publications debated the ethics of refusing service based on political beliefs. The airline's public relations team struggled to contain the growing controversy. Civil rights organizations on both sides of the political spectrum took notice. "This case represents a dangerous precedent of political violence in everyday settings," one spokesman noted. "The documented premeditation makes it particularly concerning." The investigation team compiled their findings into a comprehensive report, complete with timestamps, witness statements, and physical evidence. The medical documentation of James's burns combined with the temperature logs and security footage, created an airtight case of willful negligence and assault. The evidence suggests this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction, the lead investigator concluded. Ms. Martinez's social media posts and witness statements show a clear pattern of escalating behavior that culminated in this assault. She turned her political beliefs into a weapon against paying customers. The airline's legal department worked late into the evening, reviewing the mounting evidence against Sarah Martinez. Security footage from multiple angles clearly showed her scanning the cabin during boarding, paying particular attention to passengers' attire and accessories. "Look at this timestamp," the lead counsel pointed out, advancing the footage frame by frame. She spots Mr. Henderson's hat, then immediately goes to the galley and adjusts the coffee temperature settings. The video showed Martinez deliberately turning up the heating element well beyond standard protocols. The airline's social media monitoring team uncovered even more disturbing content. In private Facebook groups, Martinez had posted detailed accounts of her confrontations with conservative passengers. "Another MAGA loser put in his place today," read one post from 2 weeks earlier. "These people need to learn they're not welcome in civilized society." James Henderson's medical records painted a sobering picture of the assault's impact. First-degree burns covering approximately 8% of the chest and neck area, the emergency room report stated. Patient reports significant pain and psychological distress. Follow-up appointments documented ongoing treatment needs and persistent anxiety about flying. Kevin Williams organized the evidence into clear categories, building an undeniable narrative of premeditation. "The temperature logs are particularly damning," he explained to the airline's investigation team. "She deliberately heated the coffee to 165 degrees, hot enough to cause immediate burns on contact." Jenny, the lead flight attendant, provided additional documentation from crew briefings. "I found these notes from our pre-flight meeting," she said, sliding a notebook across the table. Sarah had written "Red Hat in 12C, special service needed," with 3 angry face emojis. The airline's union representatives reviewed the case file with growing concern. "This goes beyond political disagreement," the senior rep noted. "We're looking at intentional harm based on political discrimination. The union can't defend these actions." Local news stations began conducting interviews with other passengers from Martinez's recent flights. "She made it very clear that Republicans weren't welcome," one businessman told Channel 4 News. "She'd make snide comments about my American flag pin, deliberately delay service, even accidentally spill drinks near conservative-looking passengers." The investigation team's final report highlighted systematic failures in addressing earlier warning signs. Multiple supervisors documented concerns about Ms. Martinez's political comments, but no substantive action was taken, the report concluded. This created an environment where escalation became inevitable. Aviation industry blogs picked up the story, sparking intense debate about political neutrality in customer service. When did basic professional courtesy become optional based on political views? One prominent industry analyst wrote, "This incident represents a dangerous breakdown in airline safety protocols and basic human decency." The story gained national attention when Tucker Carlson's producers reached out to Henderson's legal team. "This isn't just about coffee," the producer explained. "It's about the systematic targeting of conservatives in everyday life." Within days, similar incidents surfaced across the country, with other flight attendants and service workers admitting to subtle forms of political discrimination. The airline's HR department uncovered troubling patterns in Martinez's employment history. "We have documentation of at least 7 incidents where passengers complained about politically charged comments," HR Director Patricia Chen reported. 3 formal warnings were issued, but no substantial disciplinary action was taken. Martinez's social media activity proved particularly damaging. Screenshots showed her bragging in private Facebook groups about making conservatives squirm during flights. One post read, had a whole row of Republican convention attendees today. Oops, forgot their drink orders 3 times. Chuck to resist. Kevin Williams compiled passenger testimonies that painted a disturbing picture. She would scan boarding passes, looking for passengers traveling to or from conservative events, one witness stated. Then she'd alert other crew members about problem passengers before takeoff. The airline's internal investigation expanded to include crew scheduling records. These revealed that Martinez had specifically requested flights to and from conservative political events and rallies. She was deliberately placing herself in situations where she could encounter Republican passengers, the investigator noted. Professional flight attendant forums lit up with discussions about the incident. "We're here to ensure passenger safety and comfort, period," wrote a 30-year veteran flight attendant. "The moment we start judging passengers based on their political beliefs, we've failed at our core mission." The airline's CEO called an emergency board meeting to address the growing crisis. "This incident has exposed gaps in our training and oversight," he admitted. "We need immediate policy changes to prevent political discrimination of any kind." Travel industry publications began examining the broader implications. Airlines now face new challenge. "Political neutrality in the cabin," read one headline in Aviation Weekly. The article highlighted how social media and political polarization were creating new challenges for customer service workers. Martinez's union support crumbled as more evidence emerged. "The union exists to protect workers' rights," explained Union Representative Tom Garcia. "But when a member deliberately endangers passengers based on their political beliefs, we have to draw a line." Additional witnesses continued coming forward. A gate agent remembered Martinez photographing passengers wearing conservative clothing or accessories. She would share these photos in group chats, warning other crew members about deplorable passengers on upcoming flights, the agent revealed. The airline's legal team began preparing for inevitable civil rights litigation. "This isn't just assault," the lead counsel explained. "We're looking at a clear pattern of premeditated discrimination based on political beliefs. The liability here is enormous." As media coverage intensified, the airline's boardroom became the center of a national debate. Conservative news networks ran hour-long segments analyzing Martinez's social media history, while aviation experts debated the broader implications for passenger safety. When personal ideology compromises professional judgment, we're looking at serious safety concerns, explained aviation safety consultant Dr. Robert Chen on Newsmax. The airline's stock price dropped 12% in 3 days as shareholders demanded accountability. "This isn't just about one flight attendant," investment analyst Sarah Peterson noted. "It's about systematic failures in training and oversight that allowed political bias to influence service delivery." Martinez's termination hearing was scheduled for the following week, but the evidence against her continued mounting. Security footage from multiple flights showed her deliberately delaying service to passengers wearing conservative-themed clothing. In one particularly damning clip, she was seen pointing out a passenger's Republican convention lanyard to another crew member while making a throat-slashing gesture. "The pattern of behavior is impossible to ignore," stated airline HR Director Chen during a press briefing. "We've uncovered over 30 documented incidents where political beliefs influenced service quality. This goes beyond unprofessional conduct into the realm of systematic discrimination." The flight attendants' union faced internal division as members argued over political expression guidelines. "We need clear boundaries," veteran flight attendant Mary Thompson argued during an emergency union meeting. "Our personal beliefs cannot interfere with passenger safety and comfort, regardless of political alignment." Henderson's attorney filed an expanded civil rights lawsuit, citing federal aviation regulations regarding discriminatory behavior. "The evidence shows premeditated targeting of passengers based on perceived political affiliation," lawyer James Wilson explained. "This violates multiple federal statutes protecting passengers from discrimination." Industry publications began examining similar incidents across different airlines. Aviation Weekly published a comprehensive report titled "Political Discrimination in the Skies, a Growing Concern." The article detailed how social media and political polarization were creating new challenges for airlines struggling to maintain professional neutrality. The airline's training department scrambled to develop new modules addressing political bias. "We're implementing mandatory sensitivity training focusing on political diversity," announced Training Director Lisa Cooper. "Every employee will learn to separate personal beliefs from professional duties." As pressure mounted, Martinez's social media posts continued surfacing, each more damaging than the last. Screenshots showed her coordinating with other flight attendants to identify and target conservative passengers. "Got another MAGA hat on my flight tomorrow," one message read. "Time to practice my slow service routine." The airline's CEO faced shareholders demanding systematic changes. "We're conducting a top-to-bottom review of our anti-discrimination policies," he announced during an emergency investor call. "Political beliefs will be explicitly added to protected categories in our service guidelines." The evidence against Martinez continued to mount as the airline's public relations team worked overtime to contain the growing crisis. A comprehensive review of passenger complaint records revealed 15 previously unreported incidents where Martinez had made disparaging comments about conservatives' clothing or political accessories. "What we're seeing is deeply troubling," commented Aviation Safety Board investigator Thomas Reed. "Multiple incidents where political beliefs directly impacted service delivery create legitimate safety concerns. What if a passenger needed emergency assistance, but their political affiliation made the crew hesitate?" Martinez's former co-workers began speaking out, painting a picture of systematic harassment that had gone unchecked for months. She would brag about accidentally spilling drinks on Republicans, revealed former colleague Jennifer Chen. She kept a notebook tracking which flights had the most conservative passengers, calling them her deplorable roots. The airline's legal department discovered Martinez had created a private social media group called Red Hat Watch, where flight attendants shared photos and flight information of conservative passengers. "This level of coordinated targeting is unprecedented," stated airline spokesperson Michael Roberts. "We've immediately suspended all members of this group pending investigation." During an industry conference in Dallas, airline executives gathered to discuss new guidelines for political neutrality. "We need standardized protocols," argued United Airlines VP Sarah Thompson. "Political belief discrimination poses the same threats to passenger safety as any other form of bias." Henderson's case gained support from unexpected quarters when several liberal civil rights attorneys filed supporting briefs. "Political belief discrimination sets a dangerous precedent," explained civil rights lawyer David Cohen. "Today, it's conservatives being targeted. Tomorrow, it could be any group that falls out of favor." Security footage analysis revealed Martinez had manipulated seat assignments on multiple flights, deliberately separating conservative passengers from their families. "She would override the computer system," explained IT specialist Kevin Zhang, then claim it was a technical glitch when passengers complained. The airline's training department discovered Martinez had been conducting unofficial workshops, teaching other crew members how to identify and handle conservative passengers. She called it resistance training, reported flight attendant supervisor Lisa Murphy. It included tips for delayed service and baggage mishandling. As pressure mounted, Martinez's attempts to defend herself on social media backfired spectacularly. "These people deserve what they get," she posted on Twitter, prompting immediate backlash from both conservative and liberal commentators. The tweet was quickly deleted, but screenshots spread rapidly across social platforms. The airline's board of directors called an emergency meeting to address the systemic failures that allowed such behavior to flourish. "We're implementing immediate changes," announced board chairman William Chen. Political belief discrimination will be treated with the same zero-tolerance approach as any other form of passenger harassment. The first day of court proceedings opened with Henderson's legal team presenting a devastating timeline of evidence. The courtroom fell silent as attorney Sarah Mitchell clicked through a carefully curated slideshow of passenger videos, each clip more damning than the last. What you're about to see demonstrates a clear pattern of premeditated discrimination, Mitchell addressed the judge. The first video showed Martinez deliberately bumping into Henderson's shoulder while passing his seat, followed by clips of her making snide comments about his MAGA hat to other crew members. Kevin Williams, seated in 14C during the incident, took the stand next. "I started recording when I noticed how she was treating him," Williams testified, his voice steady. "As a Democrat myself, I was embarrassed by her behavior." Mr. Henderson remained perfectly polite, while she grew increasingly hostile. The airline's internal investigation findings painted an even darker picture. HR Director Patricia Torres presented documentation of 3 separate incidents where Martinez had been formally warned about political commentary during flights. In March alone, she received 2 passenger complaints about refusing service to customers wearing conservative-themed clothing, Torres stated. During cross-examination, Martinez's defense strategy began to unravel. When questioned about her social media activity, she struggled to explain posts calling for resistance by any means necessary against Republican passengers. Her attempt to frame the coffee incident as an accident contradicted security footage showing her deliberate angle of approach. Ms. Martinez's Twitter account reveals over 300 posts expressing violent intentions toward conservative passengers, presented digital forensics expert Dr. James Cooper. He displayed screenshots of her most inflammatory statements, including one posted just hours before the incident. "These MAGA idiots don't deserve to fly. Time to make them pay." The testimony of Flight Supervisor Rachel Green proved particularly damaging. Mrs. Martinez had requested to be assigned to flights to and from conservative areas, Green revealed. She called it hunting season when political rallies were scheduled. Medical expert Dr. Sarah Chen detailed Henderson's injuries with clinical precision. The second-degree burns covered 12% of his chest and required multiple treatments, she explained, displaying photographs that caused several jurors to wince. The angle and pattern of the burns clearly indicate an overhead pouring motion, inconsistent with an accidental spill. As Martinez sat at the defense table, her previous confidence crumbled with each new piece of evidence. Her lawyer's attempts to object were consistently overruled as the prosecution methodically constructed their case. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as the pattern of behavior became impossible to ignore. National media outlets lined the courthouse steps, broadcasting updates throughout the day. Civil rights attorney Benjamin Rodriguez, observing the proceedings, commented to reporters, "This case is setting a crucial precedent for political discrimination in the service industry. The evidence suggests a level of organized targeting that cannot be ignored." The courthouse buzzed with activity as the second week of proceedings began. Martinez's legal team, visibly strained, huddled near their table while reviewing mounting settlement offers. The latest proposal from the airline's attorneys sat unopened on their desk, a number that had grown from 6 to 7 figures as evidence continued to stack against them. "Your Honor, we'd like to present Exhibit 47, Henderson's attorney announced, displaying a spreadsheet on the courtroom screens. "This document shows Ms. Saiz Martinez's social media interactions with an online group called Resistance in the Skies, where flight attendants shared strategies for targeting conservative passengers." The judge leaned forward, studying the data with narrowed eyes. "These messages date back how far?" 3 years, Your Honor. "We've documented 847 instances of Ms. Martinez participating in discussions about deliberately degrading service to passengers based on perceived political affiliation." In the gallery, representatives from 3 other major airlines took careful notes. United Airlines' VP of Customer Service was overheard whispering to his Delta counterpart, "We need to completely overhaul our political neutrality training." The industry fallout intensified as trade publications picked up the story. Aviation Weekly's latest cover story, "Politics at 30,000 Feet, The Hidden Crisis of Crew Bias," featured Henderson's burns prominently. Flight attendant unions across the country scrambled to distance themselves from Martinez's actions, issuing statements condemning political discrimination. Martinez's professional future crumbled with each passing day. Her LinkedIn profile, once proudly displaying 15 years of aviation experience, now attracted messages from hiring managers warning others about her history. Her attorney grimaced while explaining that 4 other passengers had joined Henderson's lawsuit, each with their own stories of politically motivated mistreatment. The defendants' actions have cost her employer millions in lost revenue, testified economic analyst Dr. Robert Chen. "Our surveys show a 23% decrease in conservative customers booking with the airline in the months following the incident. The long-term financial impact could exceed $50 million. Martinez's composure finally broke during cross-examination about her finances. "I can't even make my rent," she admitted, voice cracking. "No airline will touch me. I've had to move back in with my parents." Meanwhile, Henderson's legal team introduced expert testimony about his ongoing medical treatments. "The scarring will require at least 2 more reconstructive procedures," plastic surgeon Dr. Lisa Wong explained, pointing to detailed medical imaging. "The psychological trauma of being targeted for his beliefs has resulted in diagnosed anxiety when flying." The airline industry's response continued to evolve. American Airlines announced mandatory monthly workshops on political neutrality, while Southwest developed new hiring protocols to screen for political bias. Flight attendant training manuals across the industry underwent rapid revision, with entire chapters now dedicated to maintaining professional neutrality during politically charged interactions. The jury's verdict came down like a thunderbolt. After just 4 hours of deliberation, they awarded Henderson $175,000 in damages, citing Martinez's egregious violation of civil rights through politically motivated assault. The airline, seeing the writing on the wall, quickly followed with a separate $250,000 settlement. In the courthouse hallway, Henderson stood quietly as his attorney addressed the media. "Today's verdict sends a clear message that political discrimination has no place in American business," she announced. "No one should fear assault or harassment simply for wearing a hat or expressing their beliefs." Martinez's fall from grace was complete. Beyond the probation and mandatory anger management classes from her criminal charges, she found herself permanently blacklisted from commercial aviation. Her LinkedIn profile, once proudly displaying her flight attendant career, now stood as a cautionary tale for other service professionals. The impact rippled through the industry. Within months, major airlines rolled out comprehensive political neutrality training programs. The Henderson incident, as it became known in corporate circles, transformed into a case study taught in customer service seminars nationwide. The FAA issued new guidelines specifically addressing political discrimination at 30,000 feet. Henderson chose to channel his victory into positive change. Using the settlement money, he established the American Workplace Tolerance Initiative, offering scholarships for diversity training that specifically included political viewpoint protection. "This was never about revenge," he explained during the organization's launch. "It's about ensuring everyone can work and travel without fear of persecution for their beliefs." Martinez, after months of reflection, found her own path to redemption. "My hatred nearly destroyed my life," she admitted during a TEDx talk about political tolerance. "I had to learn that demonizing people for their politics only breeds more division." She began speaking at corporate events about the dangers of letting political anger override professional judgment. The case's influence extended far beyond aviation. Local businesses across the country adopted similar political neutrality policies. HR departments revised their training materials to include sections on ideological tolerance. Even coffee shops began posting signs reminding employees that all political views welcome here. 1 year after the incident, Henderson spoke at an airline industry conference about professional conduct. Looking out at the sea of faces, including many wearing his organization's "Tolerance Takes Flight" pins, he smiled. "In America, we can disagree without being disagreeable," he concluded. Sometimes it takes a painful lesson to remind us of that truth. The story of the flight attendant and the MAGA hat became more than just another viral moment in America's cultural battles. It evolved into a turning point in how businesses approach political diversity, proving that standing firm for one's rights while maintaining dignity can create lasting positive change. Martinez eventually found work as a corporate trainer, specializing in workplace bias prevention. Henderson's advocacy group expanded nationwide, partnering with companies to develop political neutrality programs. And somewhere in an airline training center, new flight attendants watched security footage from that fateful flight, learning that true professionalism means serving everyone equally, regardless of what hat they wear.